Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is NDP Member of Parliament Blake Desjarlais. Blake was elected as MP of the Edmonton Griesbach riding in the September 2021 federal election. He is Métis, Cree, and grew up in the Fishing Lake Metis Settlement in Alberta. He is the only Indigenous MP in Alberta and the first openly Two-Spirit MP elected to the House of Commons. Blake, Marcy, thanks so much for being with us and congrats on your recent election.
Thanks so much, Dennis, and always good talking to fellow Indigenous people across Turtle Island.
Well, lots to talk about, lots going on the past few weeks with the Human Rights Tribunal ruling, the naming of the new cabinet, and we'll get to some of that shortly, but you were also handed your own Critic roles, and lots of them, caucus vice chair, diversity and inclusion, post-secondary education, sport, youth, deputy critic for 2 SLGBTQI+ rights, deputy critic immigration, refugees and citizenship, a lot going on there. Can you talk to us a bit, though, about what your hopes are for some of those roles?
Well, Dennis, I hate to add to the big, long laundry list, but there's one more duty that actually I have been handed, and that's critic of the Treasury board, which is another major large profile and portfolio, and I sit on public accounts, so I'm very curious to see where, of course, people, not just Indigenous people, but Albertans are concerned about the state of our economy, the state of our country's finances, with increasing inflation and the risk of affordability, something that I campaigned on and something that the folks of Edmonton Griesbach are particularly interested in making sure we tackle. Affordability is a serious issue in Canada right now. You know, we often think of the Northwest Territories or Nunavut or even the Yukon when we think of soaring costs, whether it's milk or eggs, but we're experiencing those extreme costs at our own local grocery stores, whether it's getting gas sometimes. And so life is becoming more unaffordable for so many folks. So I'm very curious and very concerned about how we can tackle those issues of affordability, because many of the social issues that we're experiencing are largely from the root of poverty. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to some of the other critical portfolios, you know, as a young person, I think it's incredibly important to have a youth perspective on serious issues continuing, things like our economy and brain drain, for example, which leads me into post-secondary work. You know, I worked with universities and colleges for a long time looking at how the federal government plays a role, particularly in Indigenous communities, in things like the PSSP program or band funding. We all know the issues in reserves and settlement is there's not enough money. We have more demand for education than there is funding, something that in many cases treaty rights had recognized. However, the money's just not there. So we have some serious issues moving into the 44th Parliament, and I'm proud to have the critic role as I do, and I think we'll be able to play a strong role in moving the needle forward on some of those critical things.
What does it say to you to, you know, as a first-time MP to be handed that many roles?
I think it's I'm very honored, first and foremost, to have the party's confidence in tackling these huge roles, and I think having an Alberta perspective is also important. I think New Democrats across the prairies particularly are concerned with how Conservatives, which make up the large majority of elected representatives, have been tackling issues. And so I think that is this show of portfolio and critic roles demonstrates that good ideas, good progressive ideas can come out of the prairies. And I'm hoping to table those within the committees that I'll be representing New Democrats and Canadians, and particularly the constituents of Edmonton Griesbach on those issues. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm someone, for those who know me, that I'm a hard worker, I'm a working horse, so I'm excited to get to it.
Of course, the Prime Minister has named his new cabinet recently. Patty Hajdu named the new Minister of Indigenous Services. Mark Miller was moved over to Crown Indigenous Relations, and Carolyn Bennett was shuffled over to a completely new department. What are your thoughts on some of these changes?
That's a great question. I think largely, you know, Minister Bennett, I think, had a very difficult time. She had her portfolio changed in some sense. It started off as Indigenous Northern Affairs Canada. Folks might remember that, INAC, one large ministry, one large institution. And her role in many ways was to transition INAC and to divide the labor, in some sense, into Indigenous Services Canada and Crown Indigenous Relations. What I thought was the most difficult part of her role was the massive amount of confusion that Indigenous nations had to that felt and experienced. And in my former role working for the Métis settlements, we experienced that as well, trying to sort out where that responsibility lies. Who do we talk to now? And I think that process largely frustrated many folks, in addition to many of the broken promises. You know, you can't, as a party like the Liberals had, promise these large, grandiose things like ending the boil water advisories, to things like tackling housing in Indigenous communities, particularly in the north, and then not follow through with them. And so I think Justin Trudeau, especially after the incident on September 30th, missing the recognition of the importance of that day, really highlighted the gap between words and actions for the current government. And I think they need to change things up in order to demonstrate that they take reconciliation seriously. And so I'm willing to give the new ministers the benefit of the doubt, and I look forward to working with them earnestly to actually achieve some of the goals that they've tabled and to even go farther than that. You know, we know as Indigenous people that what is currently on the table is good, but it's not enough. We have a long ways to go still, and I look forward to championing Indigenous people with these two new ministers. I luckily know Minister Miller from my previous work, and I know that he's dedicated to ensuring that we can get some of these inequities addressed. My concern is that his other colleagues, particularly the Ministry of Justice, may play a challenging role in actually achieving some of these ends.
Well, and related to that, and the gap between saying one thing and doing another, one of the first orders of business for this new cabinet was to appeal a federal court decision to uphold compensation for First Nations families that have been torn apart by the deliberately underfunded child welfare system. The feds say they want to negotiate and avoid litigation, but this has been going on for nearly 15 years now. What does this latest appeal say to you?
I was hopeful, largely when the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal came down with their compensation order. I felt that Sidney Blackstock and the Caring Society did a fantastic job representing the nearly over 54,000 Indigenous children who are eligible for that compensation. I went and actually witnessed the hearings at the Human Rights Tribunal prior to the order coming down, the compensation order, and I seen the work and dedication of so many of the people who fight every single day in those courtrooms for our children. And I also seen some of the children, and I know some of the children who are listed in that appeal case, and the kinds of stories they shared with me and the events and atrocities that they went through. I think of them when I think of the appeal. I think of the people who ordered the justice at the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, and I often ask, why wasn't that Canadian Human Rights Tribunal order good enough for the Liberals? You know, I trust an institution that's third party, like the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. It's hard to say the same for a partisan institution like the government. What are their interests is my biggest concern, and why has it taken upwards of 15 years to settle something like this? And to be frank, $40,000 isn't very much money.
Right.
And I think the children who have been harmed by this terrible and atrocious system deserve more than that in many ways. And I think that although the Liberals have said they are not fighting the compensation order, they're looking at other issues like broadening the scope of the compensation. My question is, you don't need to go to the Human Rights Tribunal or to a court to actually expand those benefits. You don't need to do those things. They're the government. They could reconcile these things within their own will, rather than trying to, work with this case. I say the Liberals need to end their fights against Indigenous children, compensate the 54,000 that the AFN and the Child and the Caring Society and Sidney Blackstock had fought for, both in the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal and then in the Court of Appeal. They should pay that order and go further. The Liberals should continue to develop programs, particularly through Crown Indigenous Services, to actually expand that benefit if they truly believe that some people have been left out.
Blake, much more to talk about here. We do just have to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with NDP Member of Parliament Blake Desjarlais. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is the NDP Member of Parliament for Edmonton Griesbach, Blake Desjarlais. And Blake, the COP26 Climate Summit is underway. There were already a number of stories out there from some of the usual suspects that Trudeau has declared war on Alberta oil and stories of regional bias. As an Alberta MP, do you believe the Prime Minister has declared war on Alberta oil?
Great question. In many ways, I would probably reject the premise of the question largely. I think that Justin Trudeau is in a bit of a tough situation. And of course, I sympathize with the climate change crisis that we're currently facing, but I do think that he has, in many ways, not lived up to the expectations of supporting Albertans in our transition to a more stable economy, our transition to a more stable job market. Everyone knows in Alberta that our resource economy can't last forever. However, many Albertans have, and on the other side of things, made their life in labor, made their life in the resource sector, my family and myself even included in that. And it's given us prosperity, it's given us the opportunity to have good paying jobs. And the reality is I'm really focused on the jobs plan. One of my very first phone calls and meetings was with Charlie Angus, our critic for national resources, to talk about Alberta's position and the solution for Alberta in a new economy. The reality is, Albertans, as Albertans, we don't control the price of oil. We don't control where the company's private interests are invested. And what companies are telling Canadians right now, particularly the oil companies, is that they would like to see their own markets diversified. Energy markets are diversifying whether we like it or not. And I would like to see Albertans become champions for the energy sector, as we currently are, to continue our work to develop our energy sector in a really strong way. But it really needs a really solid jobs plan. Before Albertans have confidence moving forward in a climate plan, we need a good jobs plan. The solution for that jobs plan has to come from Albertans first and foremost. It can't come from anywhere else. It can't come from Ontario. It can't come from BC. It has to come from Alberta and Albertans, which is why I want to champion the jobs plan and to look at where companies can invest to make sure that the skills and labor that Albertans already have, whether you're a pipe fitter, a welder, or let's say a flush-by operator, those skills can be directly translatable to an existing and new markets here in Alberta. And so I'm really excited to play a role in trying to make sure more wealth, more prosperity comes into Alberta so those jobs are here. And then we can play a major role in developing better energy as a key stakeholder in that sector. I think Justin Trudeau has, in many ways, not followed through on that aspect of the climate change plan. COP26, of course, critical issues are being discussed with nations across the globe, and we have to hit a 1.5 degrees carbon plan. We have to be able to reduce our emissions so that we can hit a 1.5 degrees target by 2050, because if we don't, Indigenous people know first and foremost the consequences of that. We've seen wildfires ravage across northern Alberta. I was one of the field directors to help with the emergency in the Chuck Egg fire, for example, in 2019, where in the Paddle Prairie Métis Settlement we lost nearly 15 houses. Mm-hmm. Those families they lost a lot. They've lost a tremendous amount. And in our research and the work we do related to why these fires exist and why they're traveling so quickly, it's because of climate change. We've seen an unprecedented amount of the lack of moisture, especially this year. People have seen that. They've seen the amount of smoke in the air causing our elders to get sick, young people to get sick, babies to get sick. And so we know that our earth needs to be protected, and Indigenous people, we've been on the front lines of protecting our environment for a long time. And I think this world needs our solutions now more than ever. And so I think when it comes to climate and jobs, that's what I'm interested in. And I do think that it doesn't have to be a story of doom and gloom. It can be a story of Alberta succeeding. It can be a story of Alberta prospering and being the #1 energy provider in the entire Turtle Island. If we play our cards right, because I know we have the best labor, we have some of the best welders, we have some of the best technicians. It's not going to take a lot to make sure that we get to work in other sectors. So diversifying the economy is my priority, and making sure the jobs are here, because we can't go forward with climate change and hitting those critical targets unless Albertans are there and part of the solution.
Blake, transitioning away from news of the day to a little more about yourself. Growing up, were you somebody who was pretty interested in politics?
I'd say growing up, I wasn't interested in anything other than playing around the bush. You know, I think that was what I was interested in at the time, and especially when I coming up to, you know, before 12. Before 12, as many Indigenous people know who live on settlement or reserve, we don't have much. You know, we don't have this big wealth. We don't have a lot of money to throw around and go to town and go to the city all the time. But we had each other, and we have these simple pleasures and these this beautiful kind of wealth that exists in other ways. Wealth of language, wealth of land, wealth of family and kinship. We are wealthy in many other ways other than financially. And so I think growing up, I felt pretty privileged to have the opportunity I did to hear the language, my mom's first language, to go on those hunting trips, to go fishing, to pull a net. I think they're one of the greatest times of my life. So that's largely what motivated me to become part of politics, was to protect that way of life, to be part of the next generation being able to retain that unique identity, that unique skill, and those unique stories of our ancestors, because they make us who we are. And we're nothing but the combination of our elders' sacrifices. So we have to continue to teach that message and move forward with it. And so I think the answer is largely no. I wasn't thinking about it until I realized how at risk these things were.
You've been really open and public about your upbringing, even before running for office. How would you say that that has shaped you to the person that you are today? Oh, huge amount. You know, I often think that there's an old saying in many Indigenous communities, many watching probably remember this, takes a whole village to raise a child. And I honestly believe that. I've seen it. It happened to me. I was surrounded by a tremendous amount of care and love by people who had almost nothing. You know, people who were struggling on their own, people who needed help in many ways in their own regard, but they decided to give and give and give. And those gifts that I've been given, I truly cherish, and it shaped me completely, who I am. And I think it's a really remarkable gift. It's something I hope that I can give to more people. I can give to young people. I can give back to our elders and back to the community. I want to be able to make sure that their voices are truly heard, because their voices can save lives, because they've saved mine. Truly a story of resilience, Blake. We just have to step aside for another break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with NDP Member of Parliament Blake Desjarlais. Stay with us. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Blake Desjarlais, the NDP MP for Edmonton Griesbach. And Blake, we were talking about your personal story prior to the break. You've also spoken a lot about the racism that you've experienced in school and elsewhere. Are you hoping that these are things that you will be able to address more publicly, I guess, in a way, as a member of Parliament? No, I really do think so, yes. As the critic for diversity and inclusion, it's one of my very chief mandates moving forward, is to look at areas where we can try to reduce harm particularly. I myself, growing up, not in Fishing Lake, but particularly in school, whether it was junior high or high school, all the way to university, I faced a tremendous amount of racism, and it hurts. It really stings a child when you're that young and you're in a learning environment to be told things like Métis people aren't part of Canadian history. I remember writing a report once. The question was, tell us about Canadian history. And I wrote about Manitoba, about Saskatchewan and Alberta, and how the Métis people and the Cree people, we had those rebellions, which were often called rebellions in a textbook. We call them resistances, acts of defending our rights, acts of defending our homes, and that is the true history that created our country. And I remember this professor handing this paper back saying, Blake, do it again. I'm not even going to mark this paper. Systemic racism is real, and it touches every facet of one's experience, whether you're Indigenous or a person of color. I reflect on a story often of one of my elders from the Elizabeth Metis Settlement. And he is the first person, he's a Collins, and he's one of the first persons to have ever graduated high school from the Métis settlements in the 60s. And he said, even to this day, he faces racism. Trying to go into a Walmart, he faces racism. And he's one of our elders, someone who is one of the most respected people I know. Is followed around a Walmart thinking they're going to steal or thinking he's drunk. These things exist still today, and they break my heart. And
for anyone who knows our elders and knows our people, knows how kind we are and how much love we have to offer. But to be faced with a world with such hatred and such rejection of that kindness stings deep. And so I really hope to address this issue as one of the chief issues that we tackle going into the 44th Parliament, because our elders deserve better, our kids deserve better, our people just deserve better. You know, racism has no place in Canada, and so I hope to play a role in making sure we can tackle it in a real way, even if it means having uncomfortable conversations, even if it means talking about experiences that would otherwise want us to look away. We have to see them, because this is what Canada is, and we're never going to be the Canada that we want if we don't even know who we are.
Blake, how does it feel for you, and what do you think it will mean for others to have broken so many barriers with your election? The first Métis MP elected in Alberta, the first two-spirit person in the House of Commons.
Oh, I always just think of the kids when I think about that. When I was growing up, I didn't even know what a member of parliament was. The closest thing I knew to a member of parliament was Louis Riel. Hearing some of the stories from elders talk about how Louis Riel was elected to the parliament as well. I'm not the first Métis. He was the first Métis ever elected to parliament, but they just hated him. They stopped him from being sworn in. They wouldn't let him sign the swearing-in papers. They prohibited access to parliament. They did so much to stop us from having our voices heard. And the kind of message that he stood for, a Canada that is truly recognizing Métis as a partner in this confederacy, as a partner in its founding, and bringing that to our children, that story, that understanding of who we are, I think is so critical and really is a big part of my life and a big part of where I cherish what I cherish in my heart. And so I think the barriers that we've been able to shatter are tremendous. But I really want to recognize the folks who come before me. You know, some of the women in particular who've walked in the footsteps of other Métis leaders like Louis Riel, who've made space, who've made diversity, who've made this possible for me to be elected. I think a lot of credit goes to them and for their strength in lending me that ability to walk that path so that I could play a role in giving the youth that image and vision of their own place in this country, their own place on their own lands, because that's what Indigenous people deserve, especially children, is to see themselves represented not only in Parliament, but to see themselves represented in media, to see themselves represented in art, to see themselves represented in the physical spaces we occupy, to see ourselves in the land that we've cherished for thousands of years. I think that's a really important mission, and a mission I feel I'm a part of, and it's truly a big honor, and I really want to just emphasize the importance of young people in this achievement. Young people are some of the most courageous people I know, and they've given me strength and courage to continue to be who I am, to be proud of that, and I hope that I can return some of that pride to them, because, you know, being a person of color, being Indigenous, is difficult in this world, so we have to do better, and I'm excited to be part of it.
Well, Blake, we wish you all the best on that mission, and a big thanks again for joining us this week on the show.
Of course. Hi. Kananskam Tinawal.
That is all the time we have for this week. You can catch up on any episodes you may have missed by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca, and this episode and all of our past episodes are also available as podcasts. You can find those at aptnnews.ca/face-to-face podcast. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks so much for tuning in to Face to Face. Have a great night. We'll see you back here next week.